Hello there, guys. This is Cameron here from Dragon Camp 13, I'd say. And, and I'd say today's video is about the problem with the Kang mentality. And sorry for the big ass forehead that I'm covered in fucking sweat because it's hot as a motherfucker out here. But yeah. And let's get started. Well, I'd say one of the biggest problems with the Kang mentality is the main problem of people trying to reject, literally trying to reject their heritage, right? Reject their heritage and try and claim the heritage of like another group of people, not even realizing that any actual like genuine heritage claims that they try to do after that, people are just gonna put it to the side and not take them seriously because people are going to automatically assume they're fucking dumbasses at that point. And it doesn't really help the fact. And whenever it does come to the King mentality, it can also go both ways. There's also there could be a minority culture trying to claim a more culturally dominant culture, a culturally dominant culture trying to claim the history of a cultural minority. And yeah, literally both ways, like in the case with American blacks and Kang mentality, whenever it comes in relation of a lot of people claiming to be Kangs and stuff like that. And it doesn't really even make any sense, because first of all, I'd say whenever it comes to like ancestors of like most of the people of like any sub-Saharan descent, in the case of the Western Hemisphere, most of their ancestors literally came from like Western Africa, or Central West Africa, because like if you want to count Cameroon like as Central West Africa, then you can. Then there's also Angola. Some people consider West Africa because geographically it is on the west side of the continent, but I'd say a good portion of people also consider it Central Africa as well. I'd say quite a few slaves, even in North America and especially that of Brazil, have ancestry from that of Portuguese Angola from the former colonial era, up until the Portuguese Empire had banned slavery. Which is why it wouldn't really make sense for anyone claiming, that ancestry in general, trying to claim the ancestry of a different group of Africans, like ancient Egyptians, for example. I'd say in the case of the ancient Egyptians, they never truly went away. And I'd say a lot intermixed with Middle Eastern groups and stuff like that, but you can always tell the difference, usually, between an Egyptian and actual Arabs from the Middle East. Because I'd say in the case of Egyptians, their hair, I'd say like their hair kind of curl a certain way. Like I'd say when it comes to like you could use like some racial mixed people as an example. You could use like Drake's son as an example, even though Drake's son is probably less than like a quarter black and like pale as hell with blue eyes. But like hair like that, for example, or like loose, like kind of like thin curls and stuff. Like if you ever have like friends from if you ever had like friends from Egypt or met anyone from Egypt, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about whenever it comes to that, for example. And yeah, which is why it wouldn't really make sense to claim that the Egyptians. Wouldn't make sense to claim to have the Nubians either, because first of all, the Nubians are an entirely different group of Africans. It has nothing to do with Western Africa. It doesn't have nothing to do with the Bantu migrations. It doesn't have nothing to do with any of that. Because I'd say whenever it comes to the Nilotes in particular, which I'd say the Nubians, those people on average were like 6 feet, like I'd say at least 5'11" to 6 foot tall. And I'd say like a lot of people living in Sudan nowadays and living in Lower Egypt, pretty much, shit, you can meet a lot of these people. A lot of these people are like 6'2", 6'3" on average, and they're literally pretty tall compared to like maybe the average person of West African descent at one point in time. Even nowadays, we're usually being like around like 5'10", 5'11", maybe 6 feet at most. And that was up until recently, whenever there has been like better access to nutrients. I'd say like around the third world in general, better access to like medicine and stuff. So you see more people like surviving up into adulthood, which also raises the rates of people that could grow to astronomical heights. And in general, it's just like, you compare a West African to someone from Sudan, it's just like these people have different features. These people are literally built like physically different. These people generally don't even look the same, but people automatically look at hair, people automatically look at skin color, especially when it comes to like more like races and ethnicities and ethnic groups with more darker or tanner skin tones. People automatically assume all of those people are the same, even though there could be like drastically different features. Like just by looking at that person, studying that person's hair sometimes, their face, their nose, their jawline, how they're even built, and stuff like that in general. And I'd say one of the biggest problems when it comes to that is that once the king mentality starts, it'll never stop because these people are so confused, mixed with also like maybe some racially motivated like wishy-washy like in the past when it came to history, even though nowadays I'd say most of history, like quote-unquote racist history, like for example like how Charles Darwin classified like different groups of people and stuff to like three big races or 4 or 5 big races, which literally makes no sense. Because like you could use the Asian continent alone to literally disprove like anything Charles Darwin said in relation to that. Because it's just like you can get a Filipino from Mindanao, you could get like an ethnic Mandayak, you could get an ethnic Han Chinese, you could even get an ethnic Indonesian from Java. And all of these people look different from each other with very different like facial features, how they're built, their skin tones, stuff like that. And it's just like it literally makes no sense if you really think about it. It genuinely makes no sense. So it's like why use like one racist person and disprove all history, then try to claim that of another culture, trying to tell the people there they're not descended from the original inhabitants that you in fact are. Even though you can literally do any type of fucking genetic testing and you'll see that you have more in common with the average person living in possibly like Ibadan in Nigeria, living in the capital city of Cameroon, living in Luanda, Angola, living in Bissau and Guinea-Bissau, compared to this one that actually ever stepped foot across from Egypt. This is why in general the king mentality makes no sense. You see, then there's also the king mentality in the Western Hemisphere. Whenever it came to groups you could say like created by colonialism, like I'll use Louisiana Creoles and Haitians for example. There will always be a Haitian trying to claim that they created Louisiana Creole culture, and these people will always be laughed at. They will always be laughed at because first of all, Louisiana Creole culture, in comparison to Haitian culture, Louisiana Creole culture in general is very dominantly French-based, with also Spanish-based as well. Then in comparison to Haiti, where like the main people you'll ever really see are people that are like maybe black, very few racially mixed people, and they call themselves Creoles because they speak a Creole-based French language that's actually very different from Louisiana Creole language. They try to say that they created our language, the Louisiana Creole language, because there's a few words in common. But if you use common sense, look at the transatlantic slave trade, look at where French got their slaves, you'd realize the only reason why there's some words in common, it's not because Haitians supposedly went to New Orleans. Well, they did go to New Orleans, but they didn't even call themselves Haitians, those people. They never did. Haitian is more so of a modern identity of like 1803 and after. Then the majority of those people were white and racially mixed. They intermixed with the local population. The blacks intermixed with the local blacks there. And more than likely, whenever it came to the free blacks in particular that probably migrated to Louisiana, at that point, more than likely, they were fluent French speakers. And probably just switched French than speaking any Haitian Creole at all. That's really about it. And like, the more and more you think about it, the more and more you realize how foolish these people with the king mentality are. Because trying to claim another culture where pretty much there's also like full-blooded Europeans that are still technically classified as Louisiana Creoles, people of pure French descent, pure Spanish descent, a mixture of French and Spanish, a mixture of French and German, a mixture of French and Native American, all of that stuff, like literally. Even people of those mixtures mixed with Italians as well, mixed with people of other races. And it's just like, how can you claim to have created a culture just because there's a few words in common? And literally, that culture really, only thing that culture have in common with yours is pretty much almost everything that's tied to French. And even then, that culture is more culturally French than yours, while yours is much more culturally African. your language as well. While in the case of the Louisiana Creole language, it's the only French Creole-based language that survived up until the modern era. That's really even close to French compared to like any of the other ones, which are more distant, especially because of their geographical location compared to Louisiana, where a lot of the people here, have recent French ancestry as well. A lot of the racial mix and the black people here constantly live around like a francophone population that spoke French as their first language, and because of that, a lot of the older generations spoke French and Louisiana Creole as their first languages. So it really makes no sense to try and claim another language to try to say that you created Creole identity. Now, there's little to nothing in common, like shit like food-wise. You can even use, like, jambalaya, for example, which is pretty much like the Louisiana equivalent of paella. That was, apparently, this is, I'd say, the rumor of how it was created that I'll, like, stick with. Apparently, it had most of its influence from a colonial Spaniard that wants to recreate paella, but using like Louisiana ingredients, and because of that, he ended up with jambalaya. My mistake. And yeah, and it's like the more and more you think about it, the more and more you realize that it's like the Kang mentality generally makes no sense, and the more and more you do it, the less and less people will take you seriously. It's also the same thing with like a lot of white Americans with the Viking bullshit. It's just like you could claim to be Vikings and stuff as well. You could be Pagan. That has nothing to do with any of your ethnic fucking ancestors. So when you be like, oh my gosh, I'm not following that Jew religion, Jew-derived religions of Islam and Christianity. I'm going to follow the religion of my people. Whenever your people literally left that paganism for a reason, then a paganism you're following, you at most possibly have like maybe 5% of that. 5% of that even being a part of your ethnic genome, your ethnic background, your ethnic percentage, whatever you guys want to call it. Yet you're going to say that's your ancestors, like to a point of like, it's one thing if it's dominant, or it's one thing if it's noticeable. But to be that minimal to begin with, or non-existent at all, yet to Kang it and say that's literally your culture as well, that makes no sense. Same thing whenever it comes to like wannabe white nationalism online and bullshit like that. Want to be like, oh, blah, 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 white people created this, white people created that. Oh, dude, no. That white European man created this. That white European man created that. That European man over there created this and that. Your ancestors, most of your ancestors were peasants. You didn't create shit. You did not create shit. Those people did. They might have the same ethnic background as you, but that doesn't mean your ancestors were going to create that shit, because your ancestors more than likely were peasants. You didn't do that, and your family didn't do that, because your family weren't that specific group of people. And this is why the Kang mentality in general is pretty dangerous. And don't even get me started whenever it comes to like black American Kangs with the Kang mentality talk about our people whenever it comes to shit going on in Africa. Bruh, I'm sorry to tell you, man, I'm friends with quite a few sub-Saharan Africans, and I'd say they don't see American blacks as the same as they would see their own tribe, for example. They don't even see people from other countries in sub-Saharan Africa as the same as them. And to think you're still the same as those people after centuries of ethnic mixing of multiple West African and sub-Saharan ethnicities, I'd say it literally makes no fucking sense. Like, it genuinely makes no sense. At that point, you're literally your own thing. You're literally your own ethnic mixture. Then with the one-drop rule also complicating things, don't even get me started when it comes to the one-drop rule messing up. So I gotta do a video about that. Might be my next video, since I'd say that's like the only video idea I might have. Like after this, and it's just like, the Kang mentality. It's truly a poisonous thing. And the funniest thing is that it gets some people into some deep trouble much before they'll ever realize the true extent of it. And I'd say that's a very dangerous fucking thing. And please, fellas, please don't do that shit. If you have common sense, please don't be a king. Please don't do the Kang mentality. Please don't LARP with another culture. You can admire the culture. You can dress as the culture. You can speak the language of that culture. You can do all of that. But once you start doing Kang stuff, the people of that culture, they're going to start disliking you. They're going to start not wanting anything to fucking do with you. And for some of the more radicalized people of those cultures, they'll want to fucking fight you. So just, why? Why? Makes no fucking sense. And I'd say, fellas, this is pretty much sufficient enough content when it comes to this video. Pretty much said what I want to say. Because this is a video I've probably been thinking about making within like the last month and a half, month or two, something like that. And yeah, it's been a good one, guys. This is Cameron here, signing out from my YouTube channel, Dragon Cam 13. Peace, bonsoir, and ciao. Adios, peace.